You sold him. I choked, gripping my phone so tightly I thought it might snap. Emily, calm down. It's just a dog. You're too old for that kind of attachment. My stepmother's voice crackled coldly from the other end. I stood frozen in the middle of the college quad, surrounded by the warm buzz of students returning from class. Everything around me blurred, but her words rang sharp, like a slap. Just a dog? Max wasn't just a dog. He was my everything. The autumn wind chilled my bones as I stared blankly at the fountain ahead of me. This wasn't a prank. This was real. She sold my dog while I was away building a future. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. Something inside me shifted. The girl they thought they could control? She was gone too. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 21 years old. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. Life hadn't always been fair to me, but I learned early on how to survive disappointment, how to shrink myself in the corners of a house that was never really mine. When I was 6, my mom died in a car crash. I remember the way the house went silent after that. No more lullabies. No warm cookies waiting after school. No notes in my lunchbox with little smiley faces drawn in pink pen. Just silence. My dad remarried a year later. Her name was Linda, and she came with a daughter of her own, Ashley. I tried. God, I tried to love Linda. I wanted to believe she could care for me, too. But from the very start, I was more of a burden than a daughter to her. And Ashley? She never saw me as family, only competition. My presence was tolerated, not embraced. But then, when I turned 13, Max came into my life. He was a surprise gift from my dad, a rare moment of softness from a man who had grown colder over the years. I had come home crying from school that day, bullied yet again for wearing thrift store jeans and carrying a Hello Kitty backpack that was so 5 years ago. And when I stepped inside, there he was, a golden retriever puppy with ears too big for his head, wagging his tail like I was the only person in the world who mattered. I dropped my bag and fell to my knees. He licked the tears right off my cheeks. From that moment on, Max wasn't just a pet. He was family. He slept beside me every night, laid his head on my lap during storms, and walked me to the front door every morning. He was the one constant in a house that never truly felt like home. By the time I graduated high school, I had dreams bigger than that small town and the cold walls of that house. I got accepted into Duke University on a partial scholarship. I knew leaving Max would be hard, but I also I naively believed, that he would be waiting for me. I made a deal with my dad. I would pay for as much of my own college expenses as I could, and in return, Max would stay with them until I could move off campus and bring him with me. I worked all summer before college, double shifts at a diner, babysitting gigs, even mowing lawns. Every dollar I earned went into my college fund or Max's food and vet bills. I visited him every chance I got. During holidays, he'd tackle me to the ground with excitement. And every time I left, he'd watch from the window with those big brown eyes that made goodbye feel like punishment. I once whispered to him, "I'll come back for you. I promise." But Linda never liked the bond we had. I noticed the way she looked at him when he came into the room, like he was shedding on furniture that didn't belong to me. Once, when I overheard her on the phone, she called him a flea-ridden mutt and said I treated him like a child. I tried not to let it get to me. I figured it was just her way, cruel, cold, and calculated. But Ashley? Ashley was worse. She was always jealous.
Of my grades.
Of my scholarship. Of the fact that Max followed me, and not her. She once tried to put nail polish on his paws, and when I told her to stop, she screamed at me for being obsessed with a dog. Still, I thought they wouldn't go that far. I thought my father, despite all the distance between us, would stop them. One weekend, just before fall break in my junior year, I got a call from my dad. He said, "Don't be mad, Emily, but Max isn't with us anymore." My heart stopped. Did he run away? Is he hurt? I asked, already walking out of my dorm room. "No, nothing like that," he replied, too casually. "Linda found someone to adopt him. A nice family. A backyard. Kids." I couldn't breathe. "You sold him." There was silence. I wouldn't use that word. But it's the truth, I snapped. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at old photos on my phone. Max wearing his little red bandana. Max licking ice cream off a spoon. Max asleep with his head on my chest during one of my worst nights. I remembered the way I used to hum to him, the way I braided little ribbons into his fur when I was younger, the way I kissed his snout and told him he was my best friend. Because he was. He was mine. I called Linda. She sounded amused. Honestly, Emily, it was time you grew up. That dog was holding you back. Those words, they echoed in my skull like thunder. I hung up and sat in the dark for hours, my hand curled around my phone like a weapon. And that's when something inside me snapped, not in a messy, chaotic way, but with clarity. They took the only good thing I had from that house. So, I would take something from them in return. Not out of anger, but out of justice. See, what Linda didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 6 months before I left for college, my dad, briefly lucid in a moment of kindness, had handed me something quietly, as if ashamed. It was a key to the house. He'd said, just in case. You never know. He never told Linda, never told Ashley. And I never used it, not once. But now I realized its value. They sold Max. I still had the key. I waited exactly 4 days. 4 days of silence. No calls. No texts. Just quiet. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't cry. I didn't post anything online. Instead, I planned. Because while they thought I was emotional and irrational, they had no idea how strategic I could be when I was hurt. That Friday evening, I booked a weekend bus home. Not to talk it out. Not to find closure. I was going to take back control. It was a cold, overcast morning when I arrived in my hometown. I walked the familiar streets, hoodie pulled up, backpack slung low. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want questions. I had one destination. The house where I grew up, the house where they thought they'd erased me. As I stood across the street, watching Linda's SUV back out of the driveway, I felt my fingers curl around the key in my pocket. I hadn't touched it in over 2 years. But I never let it go. She was gone. Ashley wouldn't be home until later. She was working weekends at a local salon. And my dad? Always out early for the golf course. The house was empty. I crossed the street and walked to the side door. The one near the garage. The one that creaked when you opened it too fast. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment. Everything looked the same, and yet not. New countertops. Cold, gray, sterile. My childhood drawings were gone from the fridge. Max's bowl wasn't under the pantry shelf anymore. But they didn't change the floors. And as I walked across the old wooden planks, they creaked exactly where I remembered. Like the house still knew me. I went to my old room first. The door was closed. When I opened it, I barely recognized it. My posters were gone. My bookshelf was empty. My comforter replaced. It was now a bland guest room, complete with neutral tones and throw pillows. But the closet, that hadn't been touched. I opened the small wooden chest buried beneath boxes of holiday decorations. Inside it, wrapped in one of my old t-shirts, were 3 things I had hidden before leaving for college. Max's first collar, chewed on the ends but still smelling like cedar. A small notebook of passwords and personal info, mine and the family's. And a USB drive. That USB held every file I had saved from my dad's old laptop, the one Linda thought she'd wiped clean. You see, during the summer before college, I noticed something strange. My dad had received several legal documents in mail. One night, he got drunk, unusual for him, and left his laptop open. Curious, I checked it. What I found made my heart stop. The house? It was still in his name, but not just his. He had added me as a co-owner. He never told Linda, never told Ashley. But there it was on record. He had quietly signed over 50% of the property to me, right after my 18th birthday. The files were scanned PDFs, hidden in a folder labeled taxes. I had saved them all to the USB, printed a copy, and placed them in an envelope addressed to myself, one I kept locked in a drawer in my dorm room. Back then, I hadn't understood why he'd done it. Maybe guilt, maybe protection. But now I understood everything. I owned half the place they sold him from, and they had no idea. I walked to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, the same one where Max used to lay with his head on my lap while I watched movies. I took a deep breath and waited. At exactly 4:37 p.m., the front door opened. Linda walked in carrying grocery bags, humming to herself. Then she saw me. The sound of bags dropping to the floor echoed through the room. Emily. Her face twisted into shock, then suspicion. What are you doing here? I stood slowly.
Calm.
Controlled. Just visiting home. This isn't your home anymore, she snapped. I smiled, not kindly. I think you might want to take a look at something before we continue. I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope. I held it out without flinching. She hesitated. What is that? Proof. She snatched it from my hand, her fingers trembling slightly. As she flipped through the pages, her eyes darted faster and faster. This can't be real, she whispered. Oh, it's very real. Signed by Dad. Notarized.
Filed.
I co-own this house. You little. Careful, Linda, I said softly. I'd hate for you to say something you can't take back. She sank into a chair, the papers shaking in her hands. You've been waiting for this, she said bitterly. You've always hated me. I never hated you, I said, folding my arms. I just stopped pretending you loved me. The room went quiet. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there and let the silence remind her she had no more control. That evening, when Ashley returned, her reaction was less shocked, more defensive. What, you think owning some paper makes you powerful now? She snapped. This is still our house. You don't even live here. No, I said. But I could. Legally. Any time I want. You wouldn't. I tilted my head. Wouldn't I? I let them stew in that fear. Not because I wanted to move in, but because I wanted them to know they no longer held power over me. Ashley scoffed. You've changed. No, I said. I just stopped letting you step on me. She didn't know how to answer that. Neither did Linda. The next morning, I left the house, not saying a word. But before I did, I taped a simple note to the fridge. It read, You sold what wasn't yours. I still have what is. Think twice before touching anything else that belongs to me. Emily. I walked out, letting the door close behind me like the final page of a chapter. That day, I didn't get Max back. But I got something else. I got my voice back. And they knew it. 3 days later, I got a message from my dad. Just 2 words. Come home. No punctuation. No warmth. But I went. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted clarity. When I walked into the house again, they were all there, my father sitting stiffly on the armchair, Linda clutching her mug like a lifeline, and Ashley scrolling through her phone with forced boredom. Emily, my dad said, nodding once. Dad, I replied, voice cool. Got your message. He gestured to the seat across from him. We need to talk. I stayed standing. About. He looked tired. Older than I remembered. This house situation. What's going on? I raised an eyebrow. You don't know? I didn't mean for it to cause this much tension, he muttered. I gave you that key in case of emergencies, not for this. You gave me more than a key, I said, reaching into my bag and dropping the printed deed on the table. Ashley scoffed. You're really going to keep waving that around like it's some kind of trophy? No, I said. It's protection. Linda leaned forward, her voice suddenly sugary sweet. Emily, darling, let's be adults. No one meant to hurt you. We thought the dog would be better off. Gaslighting. Manipulation. Rewriting history. Classic Linda. You didn't even tell me, I said, teeth clenched. You didn't even give me the chance to say goodbye. She waved her hand dismissively. You would have made a scene. And you couldn't have that, right? God forbid someone shows emotion in this mausoleum of a house. Ashley stood up, arms crossed. What's your endgame here? Em? You gonna kick us out? I looked her dead in the eyes. Do you think I couldn't? That shut her up. Linda changed tactics. Sweetheart, this isn't how family behaves. You're right, I said calmly. Family doesn't sell the only living being I loved without even telling me. My dad spoke up. That's enough. I turned to him. Is it? He sighed. I didn't know they were going to sell Max. Linda's eyes widened. Are you serious right now? He ignored her. But I should have seen it coming. And I should have stopped it. It was the first time he'd taken my side in years. But it wasn't enough. You know what hurts the most? I said softly. It's not just that you let them take him. It's that no one ever thought about what that dog meant to me. I took a deep breath. I'm not here to evict you. I'm not here to play games. I just want you to understand that I'm not the same girl who left for college. I'm not scared of you anymore. Ashley rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. I laughed. That's rich coming from the girl who cried when Dad didn't buy her a car for graduation. She opened her mouth to retort, but Linda raised a hand. Stop. Then, in a voice laced with venom, she said, You think you've won, don't you? No, I said, gathering my things. I think I've finally walked out of your little maze. As I moved toward the door, someone stopped me. It was Rachel, my cousin Linda's niece. She had always stayed neutral. But this time, she looked at me with a different kind of respect. Can we talk? She whispered. I nodded. We stepped outside. The fall air was crisp, the leaves crunchy underfoot. I had no idea what they were planning, she said. If I had known. I know, I said quietly. Rachel looked down, then reached into her purse and pulled something out. A small tag, worn, dented, familiar. I found it in Ashley's drawer, she said. Thought you'd want it. I held it in my palm, fingers curling around the cold metal. Thank you. She looked at me. I don't think I've ever seen someone stand up to them like that. I shrugged. Took me a while. Rachel smiled sadly. Don't stop. Later that evening, I received a call. A woman's voice answered, gentle, hesitant. Hi, is this Emily Carter? Yes. I believe you're the original owner of Max. I froze. She continued. We adopted him 2 weeks ago. From a woman named Linda. She said her daughter went to college and couldn't keep him. My chest tightened. Is he okay? He's sweet. A little anxious. He sits by the door sometimes, like he's waiting for someone. I found her name on his microchip records and thought, maybe you'd want to know. I closed my eyes, trying not to cry. I do. I really do. She hesitated. Would you like to come meet him? 3 days later, I did. I stood on a porch in a quiet cul-de-sac, my heart pounding in my chest. The door opened, and there he was. His fur was a little grayer. He seemed unsure at first. Then he tilted his head, took one cautious step, then another, and then he ran, right into my arms. I dropped to my knees, laughing and crying all at once as he licked my face, his tail thudding wildly against the porch. I missed you so much, I whispered, burying my face in his neck. The woman smiled from the doorway. It looks like he remembers. I looked up. Would you be okay if I? She nodded. He was never really ours, was he? I brought Max back to campus with me. I talked to my RA, filed the paperwork for emotional support registration, and my professors, many of whom already knew my story, approved. And suddenly, I wasn't just the girl who lost everything. I was the girl who took it back. The ride back from town was silent. Emily didn't say much, and her father was too wrapped up in a work call to notice the distant, stormy look in her eyes. It had been days since she'd returned home, and though she had faked polite smiles and given half-hearted hugs, the truth was that nothing felt the same anymore. She had searched every corner of the house for anything related to Max, his leash, his collar, even the old chew toy he used to carry everywhere. But everything was gone. Sterile. Erased. They had wiped him out like he had never existed. That evening, as the house settled into its routine, Emily stood by the kitchen sink, watching her stepmother, Denise, pour herself a glass of wine. Her father had left for a late dinner meeting, giving Emily the time she needed. Denise turned to her with that rehearsed smile. You seem off. Still upset about the dog. Emily didn't answer. Her gaze drifted to the counter where Denise had carelessly tossed her car keys and the house spare key, still attached to a novelty flamingo keychain. Denise followed her gaze. You're not thinking of going to find him again, are you? We told you. The man who bought him didn't want to be contacted. He paid good money for Max. Let it go, sweetheart. That's life. Emily's stomach twisted. Let it go. That phrase again. The same one they used after her mom passed. The same one they threw at her every time they made a selfish decision under the guise of what's best. That night, Emily lay awake in her childhood bedroom, now stripped of posters and warmth. Her mind raced with thoughts of Max. The way he used to curl at the foot of her bed. The way his tail wagged even on her worst days. The loyalty. The comfort. The home he gave her. Her jaw tightened. This wasn't over. The next morning, Emily left early. Her stepmother barely noticed. She walked into town under a gloomy gray sky, mind buzzing with only one plan. First stop, Derek's garage. Her childhood friend. The only person who had seen Max regularly and might remember the guy who bought him. Derek was under a lifted car when she walked in, but his face lit up the moment he saw her. Emily James? Back from the land of overpriced textbooks. She smiled faintly. I need a favor. They sat on the back porch with 2 cups of gas station coffee. Emily told him everything. About Max. About how they sold him, without asking. About the man in the photo she had found hidden in the trash, a blurry image of Max sitting in the passenger seat of a truck, a bearded man beside him. Derek furrowed his brows. Wait. That guy came here once. Was asking about the nearest dog park. Said he'd just picked up a rescue. Emily's heart leapt. Do you remember what he was driving? Yeah, red Dodge Ram. Idaho plates. That was enough. Emily thanked him, but before she left, Derek reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small rectangular device. You're not doing anything wild, are you? He asked. I'm going to get my dog back. He nodded slowly and handed it over. Just in case you need to track something. That evening, Emily waited for the perfect moment. When Denise was busy on her weekly Zoom book club and her father was on yet another late shift, Emily made her move. She walked downstairs calmly, poured herself a glass of water, and quietly reached for the keychain on the side table. Her hand hovered. Her chest tightened. She grabbed the house key, the original, and slipped it into her back pocket. Then she took one of the key copies and replaced it exactly as she'd found the original. She didn't need access for a day. She needed access for as long as she wanted. The garage was her next stop. Denise always left her spare ID badge from the veterinary clinic in her car. Emily had checked every night. It was still there, in the glove compartment. Probably forgotten. She took a photo of it. She now had everything she needed to find the man who bought Max. The following morning, she told her father she had an alumni mixer back at campus. He didn't ask many questions. Denise just raised an eyebrow and shrugged. Emily packed light, one duffel bag, a can of pepper spray, Derek's tracker device, her car charger, and a printout of the photo of Max with the stranger. She hit the road before sunrise. The only direction she had was north, toward Idaho. It was a gamble, but one she was willing to take. Each mile felt like a shedding of layers. The girl who had sobbed on the sidewalk? Left behind. The girl they guilt-tripped into forgiving? Gone. The girl who waited to be given permission to act? Replaced by someone who wasn't asking anymore. It took her 2 days of following vague clues, dog forums, park listings, and small-town vet clinics. Then, at a tiny vet's office near Twin Falls, Idaho, she showed the receptionist the photo. Hey, I know him, the woman said, pointing. That's Wes. He adopted a golden retriever a few weeks back. Said the dog had sad eyes like he lost someone. He lives out near the ridge. The woman scribbled an address. Emily's hands trembled. This was it. That afternoon, she drove slowly up a dirt road lined with pine trees, heart pounding in her throat. And then she saw it. The red Dodge Ram, parked in front of a small cabin. She got out of the car, clutching the photo and calling softly. Max. A bark. A loud, familiar bark came from behind the fence. Then a blur of golden fur rushed toward the gate. Max. He leapt up, tail wagging like a metronome of joy, whining and barking at once. Tears flooded her eyes. Max. It's me. It's me, boy. The front door of the cabin opened. A tall man stepped out, frowning. Can I help you? Emily stood tall. You bought that dog from my stepmother. She had no right to sell him. The man, Wes, paused. Looked at Max, looked back at her. Then something softened in his face. You're Emily, he said. He's been waiting for you. Sleeps at the door every night. Emily nearly collapsed. She nodded. He's mine. Wes walked over. I paid for him, but I can see his person. Take him. Max never left her side after that. She didn't go straight back home. She took Max with her to a small Airbnb in a mountain town. She worked remotely, took long walks, and rebuilt herself. The house key burned in her pocket like a symbol of all they had taken and all she was taking back. When she eventually returned, it wasn't with guilt. It was with resolve. She opened the door late at night with her key, walked to her old room, and retrieved everything that still mattered. Her photo albums, her journals, her mother's jewelry box. She left a note on the kitchen counter. You took what you thought I'd never fight for. But you forgot who raised me. This house holds nothing for me anymore. But you'll never forget the moment you lost control. P.S. Max says hi. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in my dorm room, my laptop open, lights off, staring at the same picture for hours, me and Max, curled up on the porch of our old house, his head in my lap, my smile wide and unbothered. That version of me, the naive girl who thought love was enough to keep things safe, was gone now. I was someone else. I knew what I had to do. And strangely, it wasn't vengeance I craved. It was justice. Peace. A restoration of what they had stolen from me. Not just Max, but every moment of security and dignity I had left behind when I went to college. The next morning, I emailed my professors letting them know I'd be home for family reasons. Technically, not a lie. As I packed my bag, I added a few curious items to it. A copy of my house's deed. A flash drive. My spare key to the back door. I hadn't lived in that house since my dad passed, but something told me, some divine whisper inside me, that it was time to reclaim what was mine. When I arrived back in my hometown, everything felt smaller, not just physically, but emotionally. The illusions had faded. The mask of family had dropped. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove past my dad's old office building. The parking space where he used to park was empty, the windows dusty, neglected. It had been rented out since his death, but it was clear they never truly maintained it. That was mistake number one on their part. I took out my phone and snapped pictures. I zoomed in on the neglected signage, the overgrown grass, the chipped paint. All of it documented. Because see, when my dad passed, he didn't just leave memories behind. He left assets. Ones that were supposed to be jointly handled by his wife and me. But somehow, over the past year, things had shifted. Papers were mysteriously missing. Assets transferred. Documents signed on my behalf, without me present. But I had proof. Emails, digital signatures that didn't match mine, records from the lawyer my dad used to trust. My stepmother and her son had gotten sloppy. And greedy. They thought I was soft. Thought I wouldn't fight back. They were wrong. That night, I parked 3 houses down and walked toward my childhood home. The lights were off, the driveway quiet. I knew they were away, some kind of weekend retreat, according to her public Facebook post. Still as careless as ever. I slipped in through the back using the spare key I had secretly copied before I left for college. The lock turned with the same gentle click I remembered. The house smelled different now. Fake lavender and too much air freshener. But the bones were the same. The memories were in the walls. I went room by room. I wasn't stealing. I was reclaiming. Photos of my dad they had packed away in boxes? I took them. A few of his old journals and notes I found in the study drawer?
Taken.
And then, in the back corner of the garage, I found something that stopped me cold. Max's bed. Still there. Torn at the corners. Stained, but still carrying his scent. I leaned down and could feel my throat tighten. He had been here. They hadn't even thrown it away. Because that's what I was beginning to realize. They hadn't sold him for kindness or care. They'd done it to hurt me. To rid the house of what made it mine. But they didn't realize the house was still mine. The next morning, I met with Mr. Hartley, the same real estate lawyer who had helped my father draft the deed. His office was small and cozy, cluttered with files and warm yellow light from an old lamp. When I told him everything, the missing paperwork, the dog being sold, the forged signatures, his face turned red with quiet fury. I told your father to be cautious about mixing legal guardianship with asset distribution, he muttered. He was too trusting. He leaned back in his chair, then clicked open a folder I hadn't seen in years. You know, he said, there's a clause in your dad's final paperwork. A fallback stipulation in case of misuse or fraud. He had doubts, quiet ones. But he wanted to protect you, if anything ever went wrong. My eyes widened. What kind of clause? Mr. Hartley smiled grimly. One that allows us to freeze their access and reinstate your legal claim, if you're willing to testify. I nodded without hesitation. I'll do it. The next few weeks were a blur of action. While my stepmother posted about weekend brunches and her son bragged online about their new car, I quietly built my case. I filed the necessary legal paperwork, shared the digital proof, showed up for meetings, took calls from attorneys, and signed documents with confidence I didn't know I had. And the day it all became official, the day the keys were handed back to me, I didn't smile for revenge. I smiled for Max. I didn't move back in. That house held too many scars. But I did one thing. I found the family who had taken Max in, the kind-hearted woman who had unknowingly bought a beloved dog from a desperate, dishonest seller. Her name was Hannah, and she cried when I showed up with pictures and Max's vet records. I had no idea, she whispered. He's been the sweetest thing. We've grown so close. I felt my eyes sting. I don't want to take him away. If he's happy, maybe I can just visit? Maybe we can share him somehow? And that's how it worked out. Max had a new family who loved him, and I had a new friendship that restored part of what was broken. Months later, my stepmother and her son moved out of the house they no longer legally owned. Word spread around town, but I never explained myself. I didn't need to. Some things speak louder than shouting. Justice doesn't need an announcement. Just a quiet key, turning in the right hands. I stood at the edge of the porch, the morning sun cutting sharp angles across the wooden panels, and the same brass key I'd taken weeks ago sat cold in my palm. The house was quiet, too quiet. I knew they weren't home. That was the point. Inside, the space smelled exactly the same. A mixture of lavender spray, coffee beans, and deception. This house had once been my childhood haven. But today, it was nothing more than a stage for a show that was long overdue. I moved through the hallway, noting every framed photograph, not a single one of me and Max. They had erased him just like they tried to erase the real me. But not anymore. With measured steps, I reached the cabinet where they used to keep their important documents. I placed a sealed envelope on top of the pile. Inside it, my signed statement revoking any emotional or legal ties to the estate, and copies of everything I had uncovered. The illegal sale, forged vet papers, and Max's documented abuse. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for release. Then I went into my old room. Everything was gone. They'd converted it into a guest room, as if I'd never lived here. But they forgot one thing. Under a floorboard, taped for years, was Max's collar. A small blue tag, rusted at the edges. I pressed it to my heart and whispered, "We're free now." As I turned to leave, the front door opened. It was Karen. She froze. Her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her purse still dangling in her arm. I didn't flinch, just saying goodbye. She laughed coldly. Is this about the dog? Are you still obsessed with that mutt? Grow up, Emily. I looked her dead in the eye. I did grow up. That's the problem. You thought I'd stay the little girl who begged for love and accepted scraps. But I know who I am now. And I know what you are. She rolled her eyes. Please. That dog was property. We were tired of it. No, I said sharply. He was family. Something you never were to me. I stepped past her, brushing lightly against her shoulder. Check your cabinet. I left you a gift. I didn't wait for her to open it. I didn't need to see her reaction. I didn't need anything from her anymore. Outside, the air felt different, not just because of the breeze, but because I was finally breathing for myself. Back in my apartment, Max barked as I unlocked the door. His tail wagged wildly, ears perked. I dropped to my knees, letting him tackle me with joy and love and life. I kept my promise, buddy, I whispered. We're done with them. I had gotten him back through persistence, legal threat, and the kindness of the foster family that had unknowingly bought him. When they learned the truth, they handed him back without hesitation. And me? I wasn't the same girl who once cried herself to sleep in that cold, dark guest room. I had built something better, a life where I chose who stayed and who didn't. Max ran freely across the fenced field behind my new home. A small place, nothing extravagant, but it was mine, bought with my own money, no shadows lingering in the corners. A garden in bloom, a fence Max couldn't escape from, and friends who came not for drama but for warmth. I'd even started a blog, Dog Days and Human Healing. My story, our story, had resonated. Women from all over reached out. Some had lost pets, some had lost themselves. But we all found something in each other. Karen and my father? They reached out once after the legal letters landed. I never replied. The silence spoke louder than anything I could have said. I didn't need revenge. I just needed peace. And peace came not in one dramatic burst, but in the slow, steady moments. Max's head in my lap as I read, coffee sipped while watching the sun rise, the laughter of new friends, the quiet knowing that I'd saved myself. Because sometimes healing doesn't come with fireworks. It comes when you finally close the door to the house that hurt you and walk into the one you built with love.